Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nothing But the Truth with me, your host, Reverend Dr. Allen Dillon, presidential candidate for 2028. I know there's been a lot of hate comments recently about my podcast clips, as well as those who watched the entire podcast, because although majority of you think that my only goal and purpose is to simply Trump bash, you've obviously been listening through MAGA selective hearing and biased ears, but you're clearly not hearing or listening. You're not hearing the importance of the content. You're just simply listening, and that's it. You're just reading the surface material. You're not actually hearing me out as to why I'm pointing these points out and how it affects all Americans. Now, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of people were pretty interested in the Sean Hannity interview that Fox News did with Trump and Elon. But then seeing the way that the two were sitting so intimately close together, doesn't it raise the question of who exactly is the power couple in the White House? Trump and Ivana? Or is it now Trump and Elon? What takes this question even deeper into pondering is the fact that Elon said, I love the president. I think President Trump is a good man. After which President Trump patted his leg in approval and appreciation. But here's the worst part of their interview, which was when Elon said these words that sent shivers down my spine. And if you watched it, heard it, or anything, it should literally scare the living shit out of you. Because he said, I do believe that this democracy has become more of a bureaucracy. And with this bureaucracy, we now have with the three different branches of government that it should be a democracy solely answering to and fully under the control of the president. Now, there's a reason. See, this is why Elon is not fit for his position, which is, and having, Trump's ear, because this feeds into, again, the whole Project 2025 manifesto and model, which is for everything to solely be under Trump. And that's why there's been all of, the 2.5 million, cuts from the, governmental employees. Now, the other thing is that this claim that, Elon Musk is not being paid a penny, for doing his work in Doge. Well, of course he wouldn't, because guess what? He just got a $400 million deal and contract from the U.S. government. So of course he's not worried about, doing, the Doge. But then when Sean Hannity asked about those who work, for him. Now, there are 18 and 19-year-old kids fresh out of high school who are working for him at, God knows what wage. And, but Elon, he had to throw in there, but there are some governmental employees, people who have worked in the government. Some. Okay. But what's that number? And not only that, you're looking at kids who haven't even reached full maturity who are being able to access the most sensitive information of our government, as well as all of you. On top of that, when Hannity asked about, oh, well, with you running this program, and being in charge of it and being able to see competitors and, what if you run into a conflict of interest? He said, oh, well, I would recuse myself. And, President Trump, kind of patted his leg and said, no, I won't let that happen. He won't let that happen. Well, at least I hope he won't. I'm sorry, but that really does not give me a whole lot of fulfillment or any kind of anything to let me know that, there's not going to be a conflict of interest or that anything is going to be done. So that's the scary part. Now, another thing that you guys should be really worried about is that since Trump has been inaugurated and he's signed, I think it's now over 90 executive orders and memorandums, but he's also been impeaching himself by breaking his own presidential laws that he put out there. Number one being that the federal government shall not weaponize ending the weaponization of the federal government. That directs the Attorney General to identify and take appropriate action to correct supposed politically motivated law enforcement activity at the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Trade Commission. The order also calls for the Director of National Intelligence to do the same regard with the intelligence community. Now, if we're supposed to, if the supposed to stop the weaponization of, the federal government, what do you think he's been doing by allowing Elon Musk to literally be his mouthpiece and decision maker on more than just, what agencies and what groups to shut down and fire? Let's look at this. Right now, the doors are closed at the JFK Library and Museum. They even put the sign on there that it was due to the federal cutbacks, that they were literally let go because they were federal employees. And right now, the National Library, which, not only takes down, all historical information and everything else about every president, that they're supposed to be in charge of these libraries and the workers and everything else. They're doing everything they can to get it reversed. But the other presidential order and memorandum that he titled is the hiring freeze, ordering the pause of recruiting federal civilian employees in the executive branch. However, this had exceptions, including it does not apply to military personnel and to positions related to immigration enforcement, national security, and public safety. Now, there's a gentleman who was just literally fired. And when he came back from a work trip and came back to the Air Force Base in Hawaii, where his job was to, he was part of the FAA, but, his job was to specifically, watch for planes that were either militarized or any kind of missiles or anything. He was fired along with many others. There was 300 employees that guard, protect, and watch over our nuclear systems and arsenal and waste management and all that. Fired. Only 25 have been brought back, but these are the ones who are supposed to be overlooking literally the most dangerous weapons on Earth and monitoring them, making sure there's no malfunctions nor nothing. And yet they're cut. What happened to, national security and public safety? I'm sorry, but wouldn't both of those things fall into that category? Then you also have other people who are being let go to where over in the Northwest, there was 30 workers let go and fired, even though they held but now rehold critical positions, okay? Because they help provide electricity to over 3 million people, and they're a main hub that also, sends electricity to other networks. So again, what exactly is Musk and Trump trying to do here? Again, I'm not trying to, single them out, but I'm just saying what's going on. Now, we also got to look at the fact that with all this federal funding being cut, all federal aid to any and all of these, whether it be for-profit, non-profit, anything that has to do with the undocumented teenagers and children who were either separated from their parents when they were detained, because remember, they separated the men, the women, the children, and then the children they separated into boys, girls, and then they did it by age group. Now, also, don't know if you heard this statistic or not, but because they're not federal employees, they are privately owned, although they have federal, employees there, by, ICE agents and other immigration police. But the buildings themselves are privately owned. Now, since these intern camps had happened, there was an uptick in abuse. A lot of these kids suffered enough abuse just getting here. And then they were separated from their parents. Then they were put into these care facilities who have been feeding them, clothing them, educating them, giving them a safe space. But what does Trump do? And Elon suggests, oh, cut all funding to any and all organization dealing with undocumented children who, and this means not just, not just this doesn't say, this memorandum and executive order says nothing about, sending them back. It literally just says that all federal funding just stops for all these programs. So I'm sorry, but okay, it's one thing when, you sign an executive order, making all cartels and gangs from, Central and South America, and you label them as terrorists. Great. Although, yes, every single other cartel, mob, gang and all that should have been labeled in there as well, but whatever, But now to target children who, number one, they didn't do anything. They didn't forcefully, or make themselves come here. They were made to come here from someone, and, whether it be, by, a trafficker or whatever, because yes, some of those kids were brought here literally for human trafficking. And telling you that these private places, they're a part of it, but government knows it. They just don't care, because then there would be some high-ranking officials that would get in trouble. But we'll stay out of that. But so anyway, these kids have already gone through all this trauma, all these problems, and endured so much. But now they're facing being put out on the streets. Like I said, I can understand, you wanting to, target, people who are violent and bringing drugs in, all that other stuff. But kids? Come on. You've got to have a heart eventually. And, but speaking of like other mobs and gangs, like the Russian mob, right now, Trump, the dictator, is taking not only another playbook or page out of the playbook of Project 2025, but if you remember, just a few weeks ago, he had talked about, talked with President Zelensky, from Ukraine, and about how continued aid, everything else. Elon turns around and says, no, we're not going to, and we're going to stop that, because we're hemorrhaging money, blah, blah, blah. And then also he blasts Zelensky on, pretty much everywhere he could, and everything about how, oh, well, there hasn't been, a chance for people to vote, because, they're in a, well, obviously, number one, they're in the middle of a war, but also because it's martial law. Well, it kind of needs to be to protect the people. I mean, and then for Trump to turn around after talking with, his idol Putin for 90 minutes, he now has turned around and said that it was Ukraine that started the war, where he had said previously, and majority of, like, I would say his whole campaign and since it all started and all that, Putin was wrong, and even made the promise that, he would help Ukraine and stop Putin from, invading Ukraine, this, that, and the other, which Putin got angry, got North Korea involved, all that other stuff. And now Trump is turning around and saying, oh, well, hey, if Ukraine, it's their fault. They could have ended the war 3 years ago just by agreeing to the terms and conditions, and just by agreeing, to the talks and da da da. Well, had Zelensky at the time agreed to everything, as Trump claims, part of those conditions was Ukraine giving up its sovereignty and becoming a part of Russia. Nobody wanted that in Ukraine. And it was Russia who invaded. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's been proven. And yet, our dictator of a president is siding with a communist, black-hearted individual with a bloodlust like Stalin has, and agreeing with him because he's supposed to meet with him in Saudi Arabia, because I guess that's neutral ground, sometime by the end of this month. But it's just funny how after Elon voices his opinion on the whole thing, a 90-minute phone call with Putin, all of a sudden, hey, it's Ukraine's fault. Let them deal with it. Yeah, that there should be peacekeepers sent, but not American peacekeepers. Why? Because we're too far away, was his exact words. But this is what I don't understand, is that, how is it that we can trust somebody who just turns on a dime, or just takes, whatever Elon says and takes it as gospel truth and advice? Well, here's the other thing, okay, is the problem that this whole thing between Russia and Ukraine, we gave our word. Congress, gave their word, and Trump gave his word, and I believe it was a televised interview with the president of Ukraine. So, but like I said, because Elon blasts, him on Twitter because he doesn't like him, or whatever caused that rift there, and a 9-minute phone call with, Satan himself, Putin, which, him and, Zhao Ming, of China, and obviously, the North Korean there, reminds you of, shows my age, but, the Garbage Pail Kids. Look it up, trust me, you understand. Or, like the big Cabbage Patch, Kim Jong-un. But like I said, I mean, how do you side with somebody who literally is the opposite and stands for literally the opposite of American values? I mean, I know that he wants to be him, and he's trying to turn this government into that, but others shouldn't have to pay the price. I know that I've thrown a lot of things at you this evening, but I mean, yes, I mean, there are a few things that, Trump actually has done and stopped, that are good things, like not increasing, Congress's pay. Why? Because when they're sitting there and they're bickering back and forth, when it comes time to the budget, because everybody wants what everybody wants, and, you know, so unless all things are satisfied, on both sides, and both sides, consider it a win-win, then that could mean that thousands or millions of federal workers go without pay on furlough. What I think should be happening, what Trump should have added into that whole thing, is that I don't think that anyone in Congress should be paid until they get their shit together and figure out the budget and what's best for the American people, instead of them still getting paid, but those who protect them, including soldiers, the Coast Guard, Homeland Security, TSA, the border security, military, all of them go without pay. And so that's a problem for me. And you've guys got to think that, and got to know that there have been times where our actual national security has been compromised due to them bickering and arguing and not coming to an agreement on a budget. Because there's people who use their vacation days because they know they'll get paid when they get back, and there's nothing that they can do to stop them. They can't force them to work. So with all these things coming to a head, these are things that I'm trying to prevent and help with. And these are things that I'm trying to bring to your attention, is that with the things that Elon Musk is doing, and, having the ear of Trump, having, his finger on, Trump's hand, almost signing stuff or telling him, or pretty much playing puppeteer. I don't know about you guys, but we already went through 4 years of a shadow puppet government. Why is it that now we're allowing for Elon to pretty much tell the president what to do? And if you don't believe me, just remember back in December, when Congress was just about ready, had everything had been worked out on both sides, but Elon tells, President Trump, no, bill needs to be slimmed down. Remember, yeah, he was elected, but he wasn't even inaugurated. And so they put pressure on Biden, and Biden, tells him no. And so, like I said, this is not how, remember, we're not just a democracy, we are a republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic of which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice, for liberty and justice for all. Okay? Now, just remember that. But that is my time. So, as always, may God, Yeshua, and the Holy Spirit bless you, your family, your loved ones, your friends, protect you from your enemies, protect you from the enemy. Shalom, shalom, and assalamu alaikum. You guys have a blessed evening.